So this is what civility is. It's the bare minimum of respect that we are owed and owe to others by virtue of our shared dignity, by virtue of the Imago Dei.
Romans 12:18, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I'm feeling convicted. How about you? I mean, this is a polarized world. It is easy to feel powerless against the divisions that we face. But as Paul emphasizes, the responsibility to foster civility begins with us. Real change happens through individual choices that then collectively shape the whole world around us. So, God has revealed practical wisdom in Scripture that just can transform society, a civil renaissance, really. So welcome to the Truth Changes Everything podcast. We're exploring where God is at work, changing everything through Jesus, who is the truth. Today, we're going to talk about how truth changes our efforts to help heal a broken world. And my guest is Alexandra Hudson. Alexandra is passionate about the way ideas and storytelling change people's lives. She's an author, a speaker. She's the founder of Civic Renaissance, which is a publication, an intellectual community dedicated to beauty, goodness, and truth. 50,000 intellectually curious people from around the globe, and she's going to show you how you can join them. She's advised foreign governments from the Parliament of Canada to the UK, the House of Lords. She's regularly heard speaking at venues such as Stanford University or Yale Law School. Alexandra has earned a master's degree in public policy at the London School of Economics, and she's written a best-selling book called The Soul of Civility. We're going to talk about this show and the fact that Lexi is somebody who's studied worldview with Summit Ministries. Let's welcome Alexandra Hudson to the Truth Changes Everything podcast. Lexi Hudson, welcome to the Truth Changes Everything podcast.
Jeff, thanks for having me. Can I call you Jeff?
Call me Jeff, please.
Okay.
Yes. We're friends now.
Okay.
So I read your book, The Soul of Civility. It's become a bestseller. It immediately struck a chord with me because we live in such a tense time where people don't make arguments anymore that are actual arguments. It's just all ad hominem. You're a bad person. That's why you do this or that. And you've kind of highlighted this and pointed it out. I'm so glad to hear. I read the book when it first came out, but I'm so glad to hear that it's now best-selling. Why do you think? I want to hear your take on why people are resonating so much with this message.
Thanks for that question. So I'll answer it with two thoughts. And thank you again for reading, and thanks for the gracious hospitality having me on the show. So I wanted to write a book that was timeless. I wanted to write a book that really stood the test of time, because as I argue in the book and as I learned for myself while reading about this subject very widely, very deeply, this is a timeless problem. And so how do you write a book that is timeless? You ground it in timeless ideas, ideals, and timeless texts. So for example, I open my book with the oldest story in the world, the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Sumeria, which is a very fun story. Maybe we can get back to it.
I love that story. I actually quoted from it the other day in a book that I'm writing. I did. Yeah. Because Gilgamesh and Enkidu have this huge fight, and then that's what cements their friendship.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly, the transformative power of friendship, that the friendship and life together in community being the highest and most noble motivating factor to elevate us above our self-love, our sinfulness, our inordinate selfishness that makes this a timeless question. The question of the challenge to civility is because of our this duality in our human nature, love of others. Like God created us to be in community. We become fully human in relationship with others. God said it is not good for man to be alone when he created woman. And yet, morally and biologically, we're driven to meet our own needs before others. And these two facets of who we are intention. And so, I loved the story of Gilgamesh. This is a story that maybe some people know about if they had a really, ambitious English teacher or something like that in high school. But it is the oldest story in the world. And I love how this gloss on this timeless story has not, is kind of unique. But I read that into the story, and I think it's really powerful. My second chapter is from the oldest book in the world, which is a civility book given to us from ancient Egypt, the Maxims of Ptahhotep. Ptahhotep was an ancient Egyptian vizier. He was an advisor to the pharaoh, was offered the opportunity to become pharaoh for himself, declined, and chose to live a life in quiet retirement. And while he was in retirement, after he had been, reached the pinnacle of worldly, earthly, temporal success, he thought deeply, what is the life well lived? And he wrote a book about this in 38 maxims that he meant to be a gift for Pharaoh's son. And we still have those to this day, and they're remarkably timeless. They still speak to us. They're things like, don't gossip and slander. Don't malign someone's reputation behind their back. Don't abuse authority over someone else. Be good and gentle, kind to the vulnerable. Don't be good to people, your friends and neighbors, just when you need something. Like just timeless wisdom. And so I think that that speaks to. And I wanted it to be a perennial seller, perennially of interest, because this is a perennial topic. And yet the fact that the book has gone on to do well, given when it came out, is such I think it's miraculous, and I think it is a testament to the ideas. Like, my book really should have been dead on arrival. It was published October 10th of last year, 3 days after Hamas invaded Israel, and children were being slaughtered. Just the horrors of what, everyone was aghast, rightfully, at what was happening in the Middle East, and that, in my mind, heightened the need for this conversation about my book is about how to flourish even when we deeply disagree, which is the question of civility, the question of the human social project, the question of democracy. And yet, this prime example of our inability to flourish when we disagree was obviously everyone was riveted and grieved by what we were watching. And so I basically got no media, and under the television or radio that I had panned out, everything was canceled for the first 6 months. And yet I, with my mother and my now three children and my husband, we've been in 5 countries and 65 cities on book tour, because there is this hunger, there is this demand for this conversation that I'm honored to help facilitate.
Well, you've got. I loved it, and I loved rooting it in timeless things, and it will be a timeless book, I guess, in the
Thank
publishing
you.
industry. They call it evergreen. That
Yes.
will never run out of the need for civility. I sense right now in the culture that the kind of the approach is, well, look, there might be tension over black and white and all of that, but everybody loves green. Everybody loves green. So let's just make the economy prosper, and then all of these other things will work themselves out. But what you're talking about, and you specifically, I mean, you said in the book, the human condition is defined by 2 competing forces, our love for others and our love of self. That there's something much deeper that just everybody making lots of money can't solve. I'd love for you to dive into that a little bit.
That's interesting. So your question is about kind of the definition of human flourishing, of human happiness.
Exactly.
Is that
Yes.
right?
What's the root of that? Because if I make an extra $100,000 and you make an extra $100,000, it's going to make us happy.
Mm-hmm.
But at the root of it, more, if somebody's got bad character, you give them more money, it just becomes an accelerant
Right.
of the trajectory they were already headed on.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And there's a lot of research on the diminishing returns of wealth. That money can make you happier to a certain point, but then after you reach a certain threshold, every additional $100,000, every additional million, billion, it doesn't actually bring additional happiness. There's just kind of this threshold. And so it's like, if you continue to work and strive and sacrifice beyond that to earn more, it's not actually, there's a diminishing returns in terms of that happiness. But also, to your point, about success and character, was that kind of your question? Like,
Yeah, I think that is it, because I do think we could be moving into an era where people feel that they're doing better, but that could actually promote more individualism, more selfishness, rather than more civil society.
That's a great insight, and I've experienced this in my own life, I remember when I was a young and impoverished student traveling Europe. It was when I was doing my master's at the London School of Economics. I did my own little grand tour, my self devised grand tour, and the grand tour, for those of you that may not know, was this capstone, this educational capstone for every European aristocrat for several centuries. It was when you would go and encounter the idea was there were just certain works of art you had to encounter, certain places you had to see, certain historical buildings and ruins in order for your education to be complete, like to engage in beauty and just this immersive experience. And also, of course, to meet other aristocrats from other European capitals across the world. And so it was this 1 to 2 year adventure where a European aristocrat, a young adult, would with a chaperone, a tutor, travel from capital to capital. So I had my own self-fashioned grand tour. I think I went to 13 cities in like 3.5 weeks. And even traveling before then, like I was just so eager to meet anyone I could. That you
Yeah.
never knew where one person might invite you to a new country, give you an excuse to go somewhere new. And you know, and now I think about how I travel and how I encounter, like, there's something about need that makes you more dependent on others. And now now that I'm less needy, I find myself even less outgoing, and I think it's also being fatigued and kids, all these different things, they just kind of wear that. Then, like, the only thing I wanted was new experiences and meeting new people. And I've just kind of found myself, and I do talk about this in my chapter on civility, on hospitality, rather, how the hospitality being this high and noble expression of civility, where we show kindness to the stranger. And there's this trope, this theme in Christian history, but also in other cultures as well, of strangers in disguise. How you treat the stranger, you never know. That matters, because you never know if they're a god or an angel in disguise. And yes, we see that in the Hebrew Bible, but that's in other, and that ethic is kind of embodied in of course, the Good Samaritan. But we see that in other cultures around the world. And there's a reason for that. It was because if you met a stranger and you didn't help them, there was the likelihood of that they die was very high. If you were, this was also for most of human history, the norm was staying put, and the anomaly was traveling. And now it's
Yes.
the inverse. We're so hypermobile today, where everyone's moving, and the anomaly is staying put, staying rooted, and not moving very much. And so if you met a stranger and didn't help them, that was like a death sentence, essentially. And, like, you helped them because even though you might never see them again, and might never be repaid in any way, which is how I define civility. It's not just how you treat people who can do things for you, people you like, people you agree with, people who can repay you and do things for you in return. It's how you treat the other, the person who is not like you, the person you don't like, the person who will never be able to repay you. And so hospitality, being this mandate to treat the other, the stranger, with decency, respect, above and beyond, super erogatory. This is an idea in, I think, Catholic theology. It's not really in Protestant. My background is Protestantism. So, but it's this idea of going above and beyond. It's not just it's above and beyond the call of duty, kind of brownie points, that we don't have an obligation to welcome every single human being into our home and at our dinner table. But when we do it, it is an incredibly gracious, noble, and beautiful thing. And so, anyway, the point is, the reason that people would die if one didn't show hospitality to them is because we didn't have this robust network of hotels, affordable hotels, and we didn't have credit cards. We didn't have fungible currency and things like that. We do that. We do have those things today, which is why we're less dependent on each other. We show up our flight strands us in a city where we know no one. We're not knocking on a stranger's door. We just whip out our credit cards and they get a hotel. So it's like, it is interesting how neediness does increase our dependency on others, and as we have become wealthier and we have become more independent, it's easy to feel like we don't need others. And I'm saying this not to just to you and your audience. I'm saying this to myself because I'm someone that doesn't like to need. It's like really vulnerable to, I'm not very good at asking for help.
Hmm.
And I'm learning to get better at that. But it is a beautiful thing to need. It's part of our humanity to need. It's part of realizing our humanity. And it's beautiful to be able to receive and to be provided for. And I think our desire to not need and to not rely on and depend on others is this timeless, peril of the human condition, to transcend our humanity, to transcend our the foibles, the frailty of our humanity, the imperfections in ourselves. The timeless desire to the pride that we have to try and become like God, right? That's the peril of the garden state, of the Adam and Eve narrative, of thinking of choosing to be like God as opposed to recognizing who we are and our own fallibilities. So I have no idea if that's where you wanted to go, but that's what I read in
Yeah,
your question.
no, I think it's so great. The point about neediness is huge, and here's my reflection, which is weird. I didn't intend to think about this, but when you learn a new language, so I've
Hmm.
tried to learn a couple new languages when I
Amazing.
travel someplace. Oh, the first thing you learn is properly greeting and showing dignity to other people. That's the very
Mm,
first thing you learn. The second thing you learn is almost literally the word for need. I need, I
yeah.
need help. Excuse me, I need help on something. That's the very next thing that you learn. Because when you're in an unfamiliar situation, not ignoring the neediness, but acknowledging the neediness. If you're learning a language, it's one of the first things that you have to learn. And yet,
Yeah.
here we are trying to diminish our need for other people in a society.
Right. There is in America this rugged individualism, the bootstraps narrative. We just take care of things ourselves. And, Alexis de Tocqueville was really flattering in how he described Americans when he, as a young French aristocrat, came to America to study America's criminal justice system. He had a ulterior motive. He was really skeptical of this thing called democracy that had almost killed his mother and father. They were inches from the guillotine during the French Revolution. And so he was really intrigued and skeptical of this thing called democracy. And he went in eyes wide open, really kind of primed to not like it, given what it had done, the excesses of the democratic impulse in France. But one thing he said that was very flattering about Americans, he's like, in France and in England, when they see a problem, their first call is to their local city official and they say, fix this problem. But Americans don't do that. They rise to the occasion and they just take care of it themselves. They say, they get a group of people together and they get things done. We don't, but so that's an interesting kind of texture to this. Like we have this individualism and why Tocqueville thought that civic impulse was important, that a desire, that ability to just get a group of friends together and do something, is that was an essential thing that tempered the sort of rugged individualism that was really harmful, that sort of atomizing effect that was really detrimental to democracy, which is premised on this idea of life together, and that too much individualism is a recipe for disintegration of civilization, of a democracy, of a society. And so we need that counterbalance. Like community is the antidote to the individualism that run amok and to an excess is not the life well lived. It's not the good life. It's the end of democracy, and it's not how God created us to be.
We're watching right now a lot of difficult international conflicts. You mentioned the one between Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza, but we also have Russia and Ukraine, and and civility is being devastated in these situations. I think some of them are intractable. I mean, if you talk to a Ukrainian, you talk to a Russian, you think, I just don't see how this can ever happen. When you talk to I've been in the West Bank many times,
Wow.
and you talk to Palestinians, it just doesn't seem possible that there could ever be civility between them and Jews. And I'm wondering if we're kind of heading in that direction here in our own country, because our political divide is widening. And I ask people, we live in Manitou Springs, Colorado. This is where our ministry is located. It's a little hippie town. I mean, you cannot imagine the diversity of beliefs. I know, I'm just looking at different houses here thinking, oh, I know that person. And, we totally 100% disagree on everything, but we're neighbors. It just, you realize there's something that transcends those differences. They are significant. They are important. They do irritate us, especially during election season. But what is it going to take for a society like ours to get to the deeper place where, and you define civility as the disposition of respecting the fundamental dignity and worth of our fellow human beings?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to need to do?
It's such an interesting question, civility when it feels existential in times of war, political war, or actual war as a present question in our current moment, defined by violence, defined by existential threats and hostility. And I think, looking across history, and I'm a lifelong lover and student of history, what we see is the tendency to dehumanize the other, in actual war and political battles, and because then we feel justified in killing them. For example, in the monstrous example of the Third Reich, when Hitler analogized Jews and a lot of his rhetoric to vermin, to animals, to cockroaches, to different, subhuman entities, because that made it easier, more palatable, more conscionable to discriminate against them publicly, to abuse them, to experiment on them, to torture them. And it wasn't just Jews that were thought of as subhuman, put on this racial hierarchy and totem pole. It was other minorities and other people groups as well. And I think that's what concerns me today about our own political rhetoric is the dehumanizing nature of it, as opposed to grappling with the humanity of the other and owning the responsibility that we have to the other, even when we think they hold ideas that are abominable and harmful and monstrous, even if they've done really horrible things. So this is what civility is. It's the bare minimum of respect that we are owed and owe to others by virtue of our shared dignity, by virtue of the imago Dei, the divine imprint that we each have, that we each bear by virtue of being created in God's image. Genesis 1:27, God created man in the image of himself. In the image of man, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And that makes us unique amongst creation. That means that we are owed something, and we owe to others something that we don't owe animals, that we don't owe inanimate objects like plants and rocks. It doesn't mean we owe nature and animals nothing. I think we do. I think we ought to be stewards of the natural and created world, absolutely. But they are not on the level of human. They don't bear the same imprint of the divine. That there's something unique, and many today might call that speciest, and I'm okay with being called a speciest. I'm a partisan of humanity. I think that's, and I think more people should be. I think we have that is why I often refer to my book as a humanistic manifesto. It is a book that extols the gift of being human in this era where it is all too common to dehumanize and to diminish the personhood of the other, the person that we don't like, the person we disagree with, the person that we're at war with, that we want to beat at the polls. If the person who is on the other side is evil, is not even human, then you are justified in doing terrible things, that exonerates us. It's hard to look another human being in the eye. I've been told, it's hard to see someone. It's hard to actually hurt another human being. We're not built to do that. And so I hope that my book has achieved that. And I hope that, your listeners, if they choose to read it, come away with an increased appreciation of this profound thing called being human. And what a gift that is, again. And I think that as we appreciate our own humanity, the giftedness in ourselves, that we can appreciate it in others too, even those that we deeply differ from.
Well, there is so much to this, and I really want to talk about what practically we can do in our own communities. You've started the Civic Renaissance, and you are enabling people, training them, helping them move into their own communities to bring civility. I'd love for you to talk about that work a little bit, because I imagine that of the, whatever, 10,000, 15,000 people who will see this, there are a lot of them who feel this call and might want to be involved.
Yes, yes, I would. That's very much what the Spirit of Civic Renaissance is. That's my newsletter and publication, comprised of 50,000 intellectually curious people across the world who are interested in reviving the wisdom of the past to help us lead better lives in the present. And my hope is that it's a little oasis from the deep division in our world, where people can come and drink and enjoy and feast on the little things that I put out every week, every few weeks, and then go out and just be encouraged and refreshed in how they engage with others. And additionally, there's a free resource I'd love to share with you, to maybe share with your community. It's a toolkit, a little ebook that I created called How to Survive the 2025 election season and the division we're in without losing your mind or your relationships. And to
Wow.
me, that is the crisis of our division and our crisis of incivility that nobody is talking about. It's the shocking number of lifelong friendships, family relationships that have been severed, ended, strained over political difference, where people are saying, because of your view on Trump, on the vaccine, on because you voted for this person or believe this thing, I cannot have you in my life anymore. And that is, in my mind, a symptom of our crisis of misplaced meaning, how many people have made a religion out of politics and elevated politics and political issues to the level of religious orthodoxy, where if you don't believe exactly what I believe, and even if you agree with me, but you agree with insufficient gusto, like there are
Mhm.
other things on your mind that you want to talk about, or that you even if you make different arguments that I make, that's not enough. These litmus tests over political issues, justifying and alienation, us alienating ourselves from others. That is heartbreaking to me, and it's happened in my own family, where people have cut each other off because they see the other as like emblematic of the whole. That they see one person as a symptom of every bad thing about Donald Trump, Republicans, or Democrats.
Right.
And
Right.
that is so harmful. It's so devastating. So I'd love to share with you, back full circle, this resource, this ebook that has some tidbits for how you can right now start alleviating tension in your relationship that might have been strained or even severed by political difference.
Yeah. So we're going to give the website at the end of the show, but go ahead and tell us, because I know a lot of people are out walking or driving right now. And
Yes, it's yeah, just Google my name, Alexandra Hudson, and then my website is alexandraohudson.com, and the ebook is available on my website. It's just free, and it'll be delivered right to your email. Or yeah, we'll share a special link with you guys to share as you see fit. Yes.
great. Okay, that's perfect. You brought up something in the last comment about people cutting other people off. We did a poll on this once, and we found that 7% of people think that cutting somebody out of their lives is the best way to solve relational problems.
Ugh, yeah.
It's 7%, which I thought, okay, it seems like a lot more when I look at the culture and I hear stories anecdotally. I was visiting with a grandparent last week who said, my son texted us and said, because of the way you voted in the election, I can't
Right.
have you in my life. Literally just cut them off. It's not as common as we think. It's maybe a fear that's probably bigger in our minds than it is in reality, but it does happen. And probably about everybody who's watching or listening right now can think of a time when that's occurred. Can you give us some insights on how to begin restoring those relationships?
Yes. So one I think really important thing to do and approach to a relationship with a person that you want to recover, revive, or reinstate if it has been totally severed is is unbundling them. So say that you're the person that has been doing the cutting off. One person in your life has done something or has said something or thought something or voted away or thought or you believe supported a policy that you think is so morally contemptible that you decide you can't have them in your life anymore. Unbundling is the answer. Unbundling is this mental framework that I unpack in the book. It is seeing the part of someone that you might disagree with, find contemptible, find objectionable, in light of the whole of them, the irreducible dignity and worth that they possess by virtue of the Imago Dei, full stop. Without question, they and that you can and treating them still with that basic respect. And so it's basically like mentally compartmentalizing. This thing about them is not the sum total of who they are. But today we live in this era that prompts this sort of zero-sum thinking where the part stands in for the whole, because this person voted for Joe Biden or because this person is pro-life or pro-choice, that is the sum total of who we are. When the reality is, we are each infinitely complex as human beings, and we come to our views about the world for many different reasons. And so what does it look like to take a step back and try to see again see the part in light of the whole, and not be so essentializing and reductionistic that is so dehumanizing to say, because I know this one thing about you, I know everything there is to know about you. I mean, I don't think anyone, I wouldn't want to be defined by my worst moment, if that's captured, because that's often an expression of this sort of essentializing, where someone's at the grocery store and loses their temper, and then that gets captured on social media and goes viral, and that person's canceled, loses their job, or a joke or even a thoughtless statement a vicious statement even is taken out of context, and or maybe it's not even taken out of context. Maybe it's a bad thing that someone said or done, but that becomes the thing that they are defined by forever. They lose their jobs. They're socially alienated. So what does it mean to unbundle? To take the piece of someone in light of the whole. See the thing they've said or done in light of the irreducible dignity and worth of them as a human being. And then the next step is be curious about it. Okay, say they are a Biden supporter. Say they are pro-choice. It's really easy to let these conversations, they write themselves, basically. It's your talking points versus my talking points. And even if we do ask questions, they're kind of just pro forma. They're just performative to let someone, to gesture at curiosity when we're just waiting to get in and say our thing, But what does that mean to actually be curious? And to just keep asking questions, to make it a challenge if you really struggle with, jumping in with your own ideas and talking points. Be like, this is just a conversation where I'm going to ask questions, just make it a challenge, But curiosity, unbundling people, those are two expressions of the intellectual humility that I really advocate for, and I think is really needed in our moment, where we don't have all the answers. We're not totally right on everything. No person is. We are fallible, fallen human beings. That is what the human condition is. And what does it mean to be mindful of that, and also to have grace for the fallenness of others too?
Well, that's such wise counsel, and I think it's going to be really helpful. I know some of the people who are watching or listening right now, and the things that they have struggled with in this area, feeling like they need to get mental space by cutting others out, or they've been cut out and it's very hurtful, and they aren't sure what to do. Those principles of curiosity and unbundling, very helpful. Well, I wish we had more time to talk, but we've got plenty of things that we can do, and we'll emphasize that when we do the close for the show. But the idea of a civic renaissance, Alexi, is so huge. Thank you for tackling this. Thanks for everything that you're doing to help us see our own lives in the light of all of humanity, and from a historical perspective, that these are not new challenges, but they are our challenges. And we have an obligation to steward them in such a way that those who come after us will realize that we did what was right.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say, just to affirm your work at Summit, that really echoes the heart of my work, is, I've done your worldview seminar, and all recognizing that truth is truth, that all truth is God's truth, and that is why I am intentional about bringing in stories and ideas and heroes from all sorts of backgrounds, ethical, geographical, religious, moral traditions that, when there is truth, like we know it all originates from God's truth. And we should be quick to affirm it and recognize it and celebrate character and virtue and integrity, wherever it is. And I really took that away when when I've taken your courses, and just really appreciate all you do at Summit, and thanks for your leadership in that realm, Jeff.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Lexi. I really appreciate that, and very proud of you and excited to see what God does through all this.
So grateful.
Thank you to my guest, Alexandra Hudson, for coming on the show. You can learn more about the ebook that Alexandra mentioned on the show, as well as about her civic renaissance work at alexandraohudson.com. Well, does your teen or student have questions about the problem of evil or other difficult worldview issues? If they do, I strongly encourage you to check out Summit Ministries' 12-day intensive program. It's a biblical worldview conference and camp for young adults. And during these 2 weeks, we equip students to defend, to own, and to live out a biblical worldview. As they build community with other like-minded young adults, there is nothing like this in the world. We tackle tough questions: problem of evil, the authority of the Bible, the person of Jesus, economics, politics, pro-life, all kinds of different things. If you're interested in learning more about this program, please go to summit.org/conferences. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.